All right. So let's do a quick refresh. Does anybody know? Can anybody explain to me what Django is?
It's a framework slash library that incorporates ORM to talk to your database, and it pretty much writes the SQL for you.
Yep. So we'll get into specifically Django, like overall Django, but essentially Django is a framework. It's more than a library because a framework can have multiple libraries, and a framework uh, is almost like an ethos of how something should be built. Um, so there's many different frameworks. There's not just Django. There's Flask, but Django, it has a very specific methodology of how the data interacts with one another. And if you go outside of that, the way it's the rules of the framework, it just won't work. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's share my screen. And you're right, Alexander, Django has a built-in ORM that allows us to directly interact with a Postgres database, writing just Python code. And that's what we're focusing on today as well. So in addition to, writing SQL queries, your last line of defense for stuff stored in your database is like your tables, like your SQL tables. But there's also things that we can write and ensure that whatever is going to be saved, before we actually save it to our database, it checks to make sure that not just the data type is right, but perhaps there might be other parameters that we want to confine that table to, such as like a minimum age or a maximum age or a date range or a Boolean value or a very specific values. So we have this thing called validators that validate the data before it's inserted into the table and saved in the database. So obviously when we write define our tables, we have like the field type, such as integer field, date time field, char field, text field, but maybe we'll want it to be a little more granular for like the text field. Maybe we only want a certain like very specific text to go in there. Integer, maybe we don't want, as I said, like we want a minimum value or a maximum value or date time range. So that's what Django validators do. Before something is saved into a database, it will run through a validator function and check against that to make sure that that input is the correct input. If it's not, it'll throw a validation error. Otherwise, it will save into the database. Now, Django has a bunch of built-in validators that are very common across, like just very commonly used, but you can also write custom validators. And that's what we're going to do today. And that's also what today's assignment is going to be about. So first off, we need to create a Django project. Does anybody remember the first step in order to create a Django project? I'm in this Django validators directory. The first thing I need to do is what?
Virtual environment time.
Exactly. Create a virtual environment. And to actually run that, I'm going to just zoom in. I don't know if this is zoomed in enough, but so I'm going to do python-make venv, and I'm just going to call it venv. All right. So it's making it so I can list everything out. I can see I've got my virtual environment. That's the only thing I have in here. The next step is to
activate it.
Source.
I need to activate it. So source venv bin activate. And what's the purpose of a virtual environment?
It lets you kind of isolate into known quantities everything that's going on in your environment. You have a known Python, a known, whatever packages you're installing, so other folks can also install it and have the same experience.
Yep. So if you think about, like, you might have a bunch of different type of applications that you're working on, whether it's at work or personally, and they may all run different versions of Django, different versions of different libraries, and you want to have an isolated like bubble within your machine that enables you to install whatever software you want in there, and it won't affect your other applications or anything else. So think of it as like a bubble boy. I don't know if you've watched Seinfeld, but it's like a small bubble within your machine that allows you to install any kind of libraries, and it won't affect any other applications outside of it. So I source venv bin activate. I'm currently in my virtual environment. How do I get out of my virtual environment?
Just type
Deactivate.
in deactivate.
Deactivate. Super simple, but we don't need to deactivate it. We're currently in it. What's the first library that I need to install, that I absolutely need to install? This is a brand new virtual environment. Nothing's installed in here.
Django.
Yep. So let's do pip install Django. And you can kind of look up here. We've got virtual environment, activate it. Now we pip install inside of Django right here. Cool. Warning, you should use a different pip version. Yeah, whatever. Great. Random, does anybody know how to determine what I have installed in my virtual environment?
Pip list.
Is it pip list? Somebody said?
Yes.
I've got pip list. Great. So you can kind of see specifically what's installed in my virtual environment. I've got this ASG. I have no idea what this is. We've got Django, pip is pretty, Python, don't know. Setup tools. Okay, SQL parse. I don't know what those libraries are, but those were installed probably when I installed Django. Great. All right. So now I've got Django installed. Let's create a Django project, like a Twitter project. We're gonna like kind of just half-ass, just create. Let's create a Twitter project. So what's the command to create a new Django project?
It'd be like Django -admin start project and whatever the project name is.
Yep. Start project. I can call this. I'm just call it Twitter -project, and let's see what happens if I call it Twitter -project.
Like a dot.
Uh-oh. I'm sorry. Someone say something? Nope.
Well, that name's not keeping it very happy.
Yep. So Twitter -project is not a valid project name. Make sure it's a valid identifier. So you can't use dashes or certain things. So you can use underscore, start project, Twitter project.
Do you want a dot?
Let's just, you could, let's see what happens. So I'm in here. I'm in my Django validators. I've got my Twitter project, and I go down here. Look, it's like a nested project. It depends on what you want. You can have it like this. It works, but it does kind of get annoying having to go down multiple things or multiple folders. So you could just delete that. And as Don said, I can run the same command and press space dot, and it's no longer a nested project. So right here, it's all on the same level. Here's my Django project. Here's my manage.py file. This works as well. So it just kind of depends on what your personal preference is. So again, I list everything out. I'm in my manage.py file. I don't have to go one directory deeper because I unnested it. All right, so I'm inside my Django or Twitter project, Django app or Django project. Now let's go ahead and create a Twitter app. So how do I go about creating an app, a Django app?
That'd be a Python manage.py start app, and the
Python.
name of the app you want to start.
py start app, one word, and I'm just going to call it Twitter. So if I open up here, I've got my Twitter project, my Django project, and I've got my Twitter app. All right. So I've done that. Now, what's the first thing everyone should get in the habit of doing? I created my app. Now what's next?
Basically, lose your progress.
I'm sorry, say that. Andrew?
I was just joking. I don't know. I was saying
Okay.
commit so you don't lose your progress.
So you say commit it or save it? So yeah,
I was just joking.
no, yeah.
Yep,
So
add your app in the settings file.
Yep. Don't always remember once you create a project to add your app to the Django project settings. So the settings file is just where there's a lot of configuration for your Django project, but you'll want to add the Twitter app there. I'll just add a little comma there just for future developers if that this project continues to get bigger and there's multiple apps that the other developer won't get this error. So I'm just going to add that there to installed apps. That's great. All right. Clear. If I wanted to, I could have this use a Postgres database, but I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to go down to databases. It comes in with a SQLite database. I'm just going to use this for this purpose of this lecture, but you could add a Postgres database here, but I'm just going to use the default SQLite database. All right. So I've got my Twitter project. Now I'm going to go into models. The models are the tables of your application. So I'm going to come over here. And so Django has a built-in user model. So the purpose, obviously, Django is a framework and it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It has a bunch of built-in models that already exist, but I'm just going to create my own model, my own user model. So in order to do that, I'm going to do class, whoa, what just happened? So class model, which class user, uppercase, which inherits from the models dot model class. And I'm just going to have a first name equals models dot char field. I'm going to give it a max length. The char field always needs to have a max length argument or parameter passed in. I'm going to have last name as well. I'm going to have an email. I'm going to have it be a models.char field. I'm going to have the max length, I don't know, be 100. I'm going to have an age. The age is going to be an integer. It's already IntelliSense integer field. I'm going to also have an account type. I think Twitter is starting to do like the blue check mark or like a paid version of Twitter. And I'm just going to do account type. And I'm going to also make this a char field just for right now.
Hey, Tom, I have a question.
Yep.
Whenever you're creating this class, is this the equivalent of kind of like the init method for OOP, or is it something different?
So this isn't, so this class doesn't have an init method to it. And every class, when you create an object or class, it doesn't require an init method, but just the way it works, you don't need an init method because it is inheriting from the models class, which has some logic in here that when you run this, it will automatically run these in here and apply them to your table. So you don't really need an init method in here.
Do you have to specify the variable max length, or can you just put the value?
I believe you have to specify the max length, because if you look, Django char field, I think it takes in quargs, keyword arguments. Oh, so it might not, but the best practice is to to specify what the max length is. But from this, it looks like I don't necessarily need to do that. So I could probably say max length. So for the account type, I'm going to say it's either a free version or a paid version. So I don't want it to be a max length of more than PAID 4. Is that right? So let's just see if this works. And I think that's good for now. But if it doesn't work, but it from this, it looks like it might work, but we'll see. All right, so clear. So I've got my user model built. Now what's the next step?
Don't you need to merge it, I think?
Actually,
Or no.
for this challenge, I'm going to go ahead and actually create a Postgres database for it. Would you rather have me create a Postgres database? Do I have any takers, yay, nay?
That's
Thumbs
what
up.
I'm used to so far.
All right.
Sqlite, nice to learn more about.
All right. So I'm going to create a Postgres database, create DB, called Twitter app. Why not? All right. So I can PSQL Twitter app. So I'm in here. I'm going to look at any relationships. There aren't any. Great. So I'm going to clear it. So I'm going to come down here into settings, go down to my database, and this is going to be a PostgreSQL Postgres, and it's no longer using a SQLite database. The database name is Twitter_app. So clear. All right. What questions do you have about that process? So I created a Django project, created a Django app, put the app in the settings, the project settings, created a Postgres database, connected the Postgres, essentially specified that the Django project is using a Postgres database, and the name of that Postgres database is Twitter app. Inside of my Twitter app, my Twitter Django app, I created a user model that inherits from the the model class that has a max or first name, last name, email, age, and an account type. So what questions do you have? Anyone? Nope. All right. I'm going to take this time to show you, if you are on a Mac, there is an application called Postico that allows you to visually see your database. So it's a modern Postgres client for the Mac. Install it, but essentially, instead of in the terminal to viewing your application or your table, you can connect to it, and in here you can see all the Postgres, all these Postgres databases that I have currently on my machine. I'm going to look at the Twitter app, and you can kind of see in here there is no tables with it. There's just this SQL query, whatever, right now. But I'll kind of show you what that looks like, and you'll see me using that throughout the course a lot. So after I've created my tables, what do I need to do? I think someone mentioned it.
You have to put a urls.py in your migrations folder.
I'm sorry?
You have to put a urls file in your migrations folder.
I do not. I don't have to do anything with URLs or templates or anything like that. So this is strictly, we're just dealing with the back end. We're not dealing anything with the front end with views, URLs, or anything right now.
Don't you just gotta merge it?
So I have to
make migrations.
Yep. So the first thing I need to do, so let's kind of inspect my Twitter app. So in my Twitter app, I've got this directory called migrations. And in here, it's got this under init. Don't necessarily know what this is. But I've got this migrations folder. And when I run Python manage.py, make migrations, and you can specify what apps. So for example, if I had a large Django project with multiple apps, maybe I just want to target the Twitter app. So if I run Python manage.py, make migrations, Twitter, I'm going to make migrations for the Twitter app specifically. So if I run that, watch what happens. Oh, shoot, what happened? Oh, what? Anybody know what happened?
You didn't install PsychoPG2?
Yep.
Yeah.
I initially wasn't going to be using a Postgres database, so I didn't install PsychopG2, but I am now. So I'm going to have to pip install PsychopG2 or PsychoPG2. Hopefully it works. Come on. All right, cool, it worked. So I'm gonna clear, and now I'm gonna run Python manage.py make migrations. So right here is the migrations folder, and if I click enter, uh-oh, what happened? Oh, it looks like I do need the max length in here. So it's kind of nice. It gives me specifically what the error is, max length. So I'm gonna clear that. Now let's try this one more time. Cool. It says migrations for the Twitter app. I created a migrations script at the Twitter migrations directory called 0001. This is my first initial migration script, and it created a user created a model, created a script for the model user. So if I come in here, here's my migration script. So this literally just created a script that when I execute this script will convert this code right here into raw SQL and create a user model into my database. So I didn't actually inject anything. I haven't actually created my user model yet in my database. And as you do create multiple make migrations scripts, there'll be multiple files in here, 001, 002, 003, etc. as you expand. So after I created the initial migration script, now I actually have to execute that script. Now, how do I go ahead and execute that script?
Manage py migrate.
Py migrate, and now I can run migrate and run all the scripts built into Django. But for this one, I'm just going to run the one for Twitter. So when I run the migration script that exists in my Twitter application. So cool. It says operations to perform, apply all the migrations for the Twitter app. So applying the twitter.001 initial.py file. Okay, it worked. Great.
Hey, Tom, I have a question.
Yep.
When you're running the manage.py, is this the equivalent of kind of like seeding your tables or database, or is it something completely different?
So when you run Python manage.py migrate, that's like running creating your tables in your database.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That's specifically the migrate. When you migrate, you're creating the tables in your database, or updating your tables as well. You can be doing that as well.
Do you always have to do the make migrations before you just migrate it?
If you change anything in your table, you will. So we'll cover that. You'll see that here today as well. So I'm going to just do PSQL Twitter app, and I can Command D. And now notice how you've got multiple directories. You have Django migrations. So it looks like it created. So Django already created a table called Django migrations. And it also created this Twitter _ user model or table. So even though my table is called user, the way Django creates the table, it uses the name of your app _ whatever the table name is, because you can have multiple apps in your application. And now I can inspect the user model. Twitter _ user. And now we've got the ID. So we didn't specify a primary key. Django automatically just creates a primary key field. We've got our last name, first name, email, age, account type, etc. Cool. Questions about that? All right. So your last line of defense for anybody to inject, like save stuff into your database, is your models right here, like whatever your define here is. But maybe again, I want to limit who can put something in there in each field. For example, age, I don't know what the minimum age is for a Twitter user. Does anybody know? So like when
Yeah,
someone,
like 13.
is it 13? So inside of each field, you can actually run a validation, run a specific method to validate whatever's being input into this specific field. And the way that looks is, as I mentioned before, Django has really good documentation. So I'm going to say Django Validators. Spelled it wrong. But here is an example, writing validators. So here's an example. I've got a model that has an integer field. Looks like it and accepts a key of validators equals an array, whatever this method is called. So validate even. Up here is a validate even method that runs some code. It passes in the value that wants to be saved, and it runs just Python code, and it'll try to validate to see if that input, whatever's trying to be saved in this field, is in fact meets these requirements. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, these are all built-in validators that Python has. But let's just get practice writing our own validators. So for example, integer field, let's say I want to write a custom validator that validates this user's age right here. So I'm going to say def validate age. It's going to take in the user's age. And I'm going to say, hey, if the age is less than, was it 13? It's going to raise a validation error. So I'm just going to look over here, validation error. I'm going to have, oh, not order model. Looks like I have to import that validation error. I'm also going to import this Django translation UGT text lazy, or is it get text? I think that's it. As text. All right. So I'm going to raise a validation error if it's less than 13. And I'm going to say text. I'm going to pass in an F string. It says you need to be 13 years of age or older. You currently are age years old. Get older.
Hey, Tom, I have a question about that exception.
Yep.
So essentially you're writing this validation to keep people from doing a SQL injection, correct?
Yep.
So if you turn when that, let them know to, I guess, change up how they're trying to do a SQL injection, or I'm just asking that basically if you return that, then when that give away how to bypass it, if that makes any sense.
Well, if they bypass it, they're meeting the parameters of what's allowed in the database. So they're not actually like, what this is validating is like, oh, well, maybe I want to change my age to 17. So, okay, well, that does meet the minimum requirements of what is allowed in this field. So that's okay. Now, if you're saying like, they're not putting in some SQL injection that allows you to write a SQL command that executes something to delete the database, this would obviously allow for that as well.
So Alex, are you asking using known parameters in the database to still input a malicious SQL injection?
Yeah, semi, kind of like, basically my thought process was the validation error is to stop people from being malicious, but then because you're returning a string to kind of know what to bypass. I know like the consequence of this is obviously someone just lying on their age, but I'm just thinking, like other, like in a different context of something you're not wanting them to know about.
Well, yeah, if you don't want whatever field or some proprietor, like, yeah, something about the database that you don't want anybody to know, then you'd either not give any error, you give like a very opaque error, just like error not allowed, something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking along. So that's because I was just thinking of pretty much anything else that you would try to defend against.
All right. So I've got this integer field, and looking at the docs, it looks like I just need the keyword validators followed by equals an array and whatever the name of that method is. So validators equals an array validate age up here. So we can actually go ahead and test this by inside tests. I'm going to bring that over here. I'm just going to write a quick test for this. Test case. I'm going to import the validation error. And I'm also going to import my user model. So from the models file, import the user model. Yeah, I'm going to write a class test, or I would say app user test inherits from the test case class, and def test -01 what is it, test user age. I'll just say create user. Self, and don't worry if you don't know how to do this right now. You really won't have to do writing these test cases a lot. New user equals user, first name equals Tom, last name equals Preet. What's the email equals tom@email.com. Age equals, what do we want age to be? 12. And account type, I'll just make it a free version. So here I'm going to do a try except. I'm going to do try except. And so before anything gets saved in the database, Django executes a function that validates everything in here. And that function is called full clean. So if I type in full clean, so yeah. So there's 3 steps in validating a model. Validate the model's field by running .clean fields, validate the model as a whole, which is .clean, and validate the field uniqueness, validate unique. All 3 of these functions are called when you run the full clean method on whatever object instance that you want. So I'm going to run this in the try. So new user. So I created this new user instance up here. And if I run .full clean on that, and if it comes back as true, like it doesn't come back any errors, then it's good. Otherwise, I'm going to execute a message that says like, hey, this is not good. So I'm going to run try except validation error as E. There you go. So in this first test case, I created a new user instance. I run that full clean to make sure that, hey, this instance of this user meets all the requirements in here. If it does, that's great. Otherwise, it's going to run this user cannot be under the age of 13. And it's going to give this message like what age that is. Don't worry about writing these, but I just kind of want to show you what a validator kind of looks like. So I'm going to run Python manage.py test and see if, in fact, a user of the age of 12 is able to be saved in the database. But but before I do that, so when I created that database, or when I created these user models and ran make migrations and migrate, I didn't have these validators in here already in the max. Or yeah, I didn't have this validator in here. So what am I going to have to do? So I'm updating my models, this user table.
Would you have to merge again?
Yep. So I'm going to have to Python manage.py make migrations .twitter, because I updated this, so I needed to create another migration script. See, now it looks like it specifically says like what altered the user age field. So altered user age. Now I can Python manage.py migrate Twitter. So it updated this field. So now let's actually run this test to see if it works. Python manage.py test. Is it test? All right. So it looks like it failed. So it came in here, created test user, new field, full clean, validation error, age, you need to be 13 years of age or older. You are currently 12 years or older, or you're currently 12 years old, get older. But let's see if I run this and the user is 15. So I changed the age of the user to 15, clear the terminal. Let's run that again to see if this works. Cool, it tests. So that means that this validation is working. Great. Questions? All right, let's try another one.
So that didn't update to the database until you do the psychopg commits function, right?
It did not update anything in the Postgres database until I made a new migration script, as well as migrated that migration script into the Postgres database.
Okay.
So for account type, let's do one for account type. Very similar to test create user, or I guess this should be like create or like user age. So this is going to be a second test. I'm going to say test account type. Same thing, new user, age 15. I want to make sure this passes the age, but for account type, let's see what I want. Maybe since the max length is 4, I only want the values in this field to be either free or paid. So let's create a new validators. So validators, validate account type. I'm going to come up here, create a new validator called validate account type that takes in an account type. And how would I want to just validate, just make sure that the account type is either used or like free or paid?
Statement, if the value is free, then obviously it's free, else it's paid.
Yeah, I can either do like say, hey, but like what if somebody, as you said, did some SQL injection and just made this like something like that, like JKFD, which I don't want.
Would you make it a strict, so I guess 3 equal signs to make sure it's actual, like the actual value is paid? Is that what you're asking?
No, because you said like if it's not free, then it would equal paid, right?
I guess you would do an if and then an LF and then an else.
You could do that, or you can just say validate account or validate account types, or not validate.
Just account type, right?
Valid account types. There's a couple ways we can do it. Free, paid, and I can say like, hey, if account type is not in valid account types, valid account types, then I can raise that validation error. Raise this validation error. I'm going to say account underscore type is not valid. Please select a valid account type. And I could just put like paid or free. So I created an account type validator. And inside of my models, I created and I said for the account type field, validators execute this validated account type. It already knows when it runs this, it's going to pass in whatever is supposed to be the account type into this this validated account type as an argument. It runs this logic, and if it's not true, then it'll fail, or it should fail.
So the validator would be used for an insert or a modify, but it wouldn't have any effect on garbage that's already in the database?
Correct. So for here, account type. So maybe for account type of, just like HHHH, which shouldn't be a validated or a valid account type.
Do we want to hard code the account types in that string though?
It doesn't matter. Like, it depends on what you want to tell them, like what it should be. And this isn't specifically for like just SQL injections. It could be for anything. It could be like for a front end developer that pass stuff into the database, and I didn't realize that it has to be only free or paid. Like maybe the front end developer created a list of another option, and that was of a length of 4. And hey, we didn't want that, so the database kicked it out. It says, hey, that's not allowed.
I mean, if you updated line 10, then you'd have to update that string as well.
Right. Yeah. That's fine. I'm okay with that.
Actually, if you wanted to, you could have the error message include the variables from line 10, so you didn't have to update it if you change them later.
Oh, right. Yeah, you can just make it dynamic. All right. So again, I created a new validator for validate account type. So again, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to create a new migration script. Great. Now I need to migrate again. Where to go? Twitter. Alter account type. Now I can go ahead and test that. So ran 2 tests, 1 failure. Let's see what that failure is. Please enter a valid account type. Great. So then maybe I'm going to say free for this one. Clear. ran 2 tests and they passed. Questions about validators?
What's the in for in line 20?
Go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
It wants to find the first string in the string of the second. So you're looking for the one and the other. I think it's thrown an error there because it's not precisely the same.
Yeah. So yeah, the error. Actually, I don't know.
Oh, it's an assert. Okay.
Yeah, has something to do with that. But so we're writing our own validators. But again, I said Django has a bunch of built-in validators. So what's one that I can use in place of age instead of writing my own validate age? I can actually use something in here, max of value or min value validator. So raises a validation with code min value if value is less than the limit value. So I can actually just, instead of writing my own validate age, I can actually get rid of that one and import. I'm going to bring in all the validators. So from Django core validators, I'm going to import everything. And instead of validate age, I'm going to run this min value validator, min value validator. And I want the minimum value to be at least 13. So if I can clear that, I changed the user model. I'm going to have to make migrations. Uh-oh. Where did it go? Validate age.
Does it have to be in the square brackets?
Yeah. Let's look.
Is it on your test on line, what, 19? Is it because it's called min value instead of validation error? On your test?
Online my test. Let's see. No. What it? Alter user age. Validate age. Did I not save it? Oh, let's see something. Bring that up here. Import validators. Min value validator 13. I don't know why that happened. So if I got rid of that, just comment that out. I just want to see if that changes anything. Huh. It's interesting. Well, let's just keep.
Is the message argument required?
Is the message argument required?
Min value validator accepts a limit value and a message.
So limit value message equals none. I don't think you have to.
Well, maybe
By default, it's none.
None.
Yeah. But whatever. Let's.
I wonder if it's because since you're removing the previously validated field and part of the migration is it has to still exist in order to figure out what to do with it. Maybe
that's what. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But whatever. That's all right. Make migrations, no changes detected. Now I need to migrate Twitter. All right. So now if I run those tests again, and I have a user that's less than, 13. Again, I get an error right here. Age, ensure this is value is greater than or equal to 13. So this is the error message from the min value validator. I could apply the same things for email. So email is a char field, and maybe I had created a validator for email, because I think there is one for email as well. There's an email validator that validates an email. However, when you're creating models in Django model type, models, where'd it go? And that's where I was just at, field types. They have a email field, and the email field is the same thing as a char field, except it uses the email validator. It automatically runs the email validator. So this is probably better to have an email field. But yeah. So those are validators. So just be aware of the full clean method and the save method or the clean method. You can overwrite these as well. So just be cognizant of that. But with that, those are validators. Any questions?
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
What if like you want to format all the input in a certain way? Say like you're putting in free or paid and you always want free to be lowercase. Would you use a validator for that or something else?
Oh, you can use a validator for that. But no, yeah, you would use a validator for that. However, so if that's the case, you'd throw that through a validator. However, you'd also validate that on the front end. So whatever somebody types in when they click send, there'd be some JavaScript that automatically converts it to lowercase or uppercase or whatever that you want. And then it sends it over to the back end in the correct format. So this is, but you'd also have a validator here just for extra protection. Oh, good question.